My name is Clara Vance. I am 23 years old, and on the morning of my college graduation, my parents abandoned me at a rainy bus stop so they could take delivery of a luxury sports car for my teenage brother. While I stood shivering in a cheap, scratchy gown, holding a cardboard mortarboard over my head to keep it from melting in the heavy Nashville rain, my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "Take the bus, Clara. We are buying your brother a Porsche." They laughed right in my face, completely ignoring the fact that I had just worked 3 grueling jobs to earn my degree, leaving me humiliated in front of our wealthy neighbors. But there is one thing they did not know. I was not just graduating. I was quietly building the very financial machine that would soon hold the mortgage to their sprawling real estate empire. And right now, those same parents are crying in my lobby, desperately begging me for a financial bailout. Before I tell you how this entire empire flipped, please hit that like button if you believe in absolute justice. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let us go back to where the nightmare truly began. The scratchy polyester of my graduation gown felt heavy and suffocating as the Nashville morning humidity mixed with a cold, relentless drizzle. I stood at the corner of Belmead Boulevard, my feet soaking wet inside a pair of discounted loafers I had bought at Walmart specifically for today. Down the street, inside the heated, brightly lit garage of my family's colonial mansion, a completely different celebration was underway. My father, Richard Vance, a prominent commercial real estate developer, was beaming with a pride I had never once seen directed at me. He was wearing his tailored Italian suit, his gold watch catching the harsh glare of the garage security lights. Beside him stood my mother, Eleanor, her signature Chanel No. 5 perfume drifting all the way down the driveway and cutting through the smell of the damp asphalt. She was openly weeping happy tears, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief while clinging to the arm of my 18-year-old brother, Julian. Julian had barely managed to graduate high school. His academic career was a disaster of skipped classes and expensive private tutors, but right now he was looking smugly at a brand-new, custom blue Porsche Taycan parked in the center of the driveway. A massive red velvet bow sat on the hood, soaking up the light rain. "My beautiful boy," my mother cried out, her voice echoing off the brick pillars of our gated entry. "You deserve the entire universe. This is your moment." My father puffed out his chest, clapping Julian on the shoulder so hard the teenager stumbled forward. "The engineering on this machine is flawless," my father announced proudly to the delivery driver and our peering neighbors. "Only the absolute best for Vance. This car is an investment in his massive future." Julian squealed, jumping into the driver's seat and revving the engine until the roar vibrated right through the soles of my cheap shoes. I stood 50 yards away, completely invisible. My 4-year university career, a journey I had survived without a single cent from their bank accounts, was culminating in a ceremony of 45-minute bus ride away downtown. Neither of them had asked what time the commencement started. Neither of them had offered a ride. The night before, I had practically begged them for their presence. I had taken the absolute last $70 in my checking account to buy a simple, elegant white silk dress from a local boutique. I wanted to look like a woman who belonged to a proud family. I sat on my lumpy dorm bed, dialed my mother's number, and invited them to an early celebratory lunch at the Palm. I promised it would be my treat. I wanted them to know I did not need their money, only their eyes on me. My mother had answered the phone with the distinct sound of crystal wine glasses clinking in the background. When I explained the schedule, a long, agonizing silence stretched over the line. "Oh, Clara, sweetheart," she had said, adopting that sickly sweet southern drawl she used whenever she was about to deliver a crushing blow. "I am afraid we are in a bit of a serious bind. The transport truck delivering Julian's graduation present is arriving tomorrow morning. The delivery window is incredibly tight, and your father has to sign the master title documents." I gripped the plastic casing of my phone until my palm ached. His high school graduation is not for another 2 weeks. My university commencement is tomorrow at 10 in the morning. I am graduating summa cum laude, Mom. What could possibly be more important than seeing me walk across that stage? My father had snatched the receiver from her. His voice was sharp, cold, and entirely transactional. Clara, stop being so dramatic. We cannot be in two places at once. This car is a delicate piece of machinery, and I will not have it sitting on a transport carrier. Julian earned this. A Porsche is a significant reward for a significant milestone. You are an independent girl. You always have been. Take the public bus or hire a cab. You will figure it out. They hung up, leaving me listening to the dead dial tone. Standing at the bus stop the next morning, watching Julian admire his leather steering wheel, something inside the deepest core of my soul fractured. It was a clean, quiet break. The desperate, pathetic inner child who had spent 2 decades performing for a scrap of their affection finally died. The city bus hissed to a halt in front of me, throwing a wave of muddy puddle water onto my shins. The folding doors rattled open. I climbed the rubber steps, dropped a crumpled $1 bill and 3/4 into the fare box, and walked to the very back seat. I sat down on the cracked vinyl, resting my forehead against the cold, smudged glass. As the bus pulled away from the curb, I looked back one last time. My family was gathered around the shiny hood of the Porsche, posing for a picture. They never looked at the street. I pulled that $1.75 bus ticket from my pocket, smoothed out the wrinkled corners, and placed it behind the clear plastic window of my wallet. I made a silent, unshakable vow right then. I would keep this piece of paper like a binding legal contract. I would build a fortress so towering and undeniable that one day, my father would have to liquidate his prized assets just to buy my time. I thought the worst of my family's cruelty was behind me. I was so incredibly wrong. To understand the monstrous betrayal that was coming, you have to understand the ledger my father kept. You have to see what happened in Belmead when I was 12 years old. Growing up inside the Vance family home was like living inside a highly exclusive corporate headquarters where Julian was the sole shareholder and I was a depreciating liability. The house was a massive, sprawling colonial with a pristine lawn that my mother used as a stage to host neighborhood HOA meetings and lavish Thanksgiving dinners. The walls of the grand foyer were lined with professionally framed portraits of Julian. Julian holding a silver rattle, Julian sitting on my father's shoulders at a country club golf tournament, Julian wearing a tailored tuxedo for his middle school formal. There was exactly one photograph of me in the entire public area of the house. It was a tiny, faded 5x7 print tucked entirely behind a massive oil painting of my mother's prized show horses. In it, I was 7 years old, wearing a faded yellow dress, staring at the floor. It was a visual representation of my status. My father viewed his family through the strict lens of commercial real estate. He evaluated human relationships based entirely on their return on investment. Julian was prime beachfront property with endless potential for appreciation. My father poured capital into him endlessly. He hired private tennis coaches, paid thousands of dollars for elite golf academies, and funded a wardrobe that cost more than my entire 4-year college tuition. His love was an aggressive financial portfolio. I, however, was classified as a sensible, low-maintenance utility structure. I was reliable and structurally sound, but completely lacking in curb appeal. Because I was naturally quiet and studious, my father viewed my independence not as a strength, but as proof that I required zero financial allocation. My straight-A report cards were expected, treated like a building passing a routine city inspection. I remember a specific dinner when I was 15 years old. The dining room table was loaded with fine china and roasted meats. I had spent 3 months preparing an application for a highly competitive summer science academy at Vanderbilt University. I waited for a lull in my mother's endless chatter about the upcoming country club renovation. My heart thudded violently against my ribs. I received my acceptance letter from the Vanderbilt Advanced Science program today, I announced, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. My father paused, his steak knife hovering over his plate. He glanced at me with his cold, calculating eyes. The Science Academy? Good. That will look solid on a college application and save us from paying expensive tuition later. Make sure you keep your grades up so you qualify for academic grants. He immediately turned his head toward Julian. Now, Julian, your mother tells me you want to upgrade your golf clubs before the regional tournament. I told the pro shop to put that $4,000 set on my personal tab. The conversation shifted instantly. My monumental achievement was swept off the table like a stray crumb. My mother dealt in a different currency: social manipulation and emotional exhaustion. She managed Julian's social calendar like a ruthless corporate executive, but she had zero emotional bandwidth left for me. Whenever I tried to share my internal world with her, she expertly redirected me to perform domestic labor. One Saturday afternoon, I found her pruning her expensive rose bushes behind the patio. I was holding a classic literature book I had just finished, desperate to discuss the themes of isolation with someone who cared. "Mom," I started softly, stepping onto the stone pavers. "I just finished this incredible story, and the main character's struggles really reminded me of how I feel at school." She did not even look up from her golden shears. "Oh, that is nice, Clara. Listen, sweetheart, be a dear and run down to the laundry room. Julian has a massive country club mixer tonight, and his favorite linen shirt is sitting in the hamper. We are in absolute crisis mode right now. I need that shirt washed and pressed immediately." Her tone was dripping with honey, but the command was absolute. Julian's social life was a certified emergency. My intellectual curiosity was an annoying interruption. I swallowed the lump in my throat, walked down to the windowless basement, and spent the next 2 hours ironing my brother's clothes. The financial disparity reached its sickening peak during the holidays. Christmas morning in the Vance household was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The living room was always buried in towering stacks of designer boxes, all bearing Julian's name. One year, Julian unwrapped a solid gold Rolex watch and the master keys to a brand new Yamaha jet ski. He screamed with joy, running around the room while my parents captured every second on their expensive cameras. When the chaos cleared, my father handed me 2 heavy, unwrapped packages from beneath the side table. I opened them to find a dry, highly technical dictionary of corporate economics and a massive, generic bottle of daily multivitamins from Walmart. "To keep your physical strength up during those long nights of studying," my father explained, offering a curt, stiff nod. "We expect you to maintain your top-class ranking. Do not embarrass the Vance name when the school publishes the GPA lists." I held the plastic bottle of vitamins. They rattled inside the casing like loose teeth. It was not that the gifts were malicious, it was that they clearly defined our permanent roles. Julian was born to consume luxury. I was born to produce labor. The ultimate defining trauma occurred during the spring of my 8th grade year. I had spent 5 exhausting months designing and building a functional solar-powered water desalinator for the state physics championship. I spent my weekends hidden away in the cold garage, soldering delicate copper wires, calibrating glass tubing, and reading advanced college engineering textbooks until my vision blurred. I had chemical burns on my fingertips and permanent dark circles under my eyes. When the judges announced my name as the absolute first-place winner in the entire state of Tennessee, a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph hit my chest. I was handed a massive, gleaming wood and metal trophy that stood nearly 3 feet tall. I carried it all the way home through Belle Meade, refusing to take the bus because I wanted to feel the weight of my victory in my arms. I burst through the heavy mahogany front door, panting and soaking wet from the afternoon humidity. "I won first place," I announced, my voice trembling with an immense joy I could no longer contain. The judges said my prototype was the most advanced entry they had seen in 10 years. My mother was sitting on the velvet sofa, holding a silver tray of tea. She winced, raising a manicured finger to her lips. "Clara, please lower your voice. You are being completely disruptive. Julian is in the middle of rehearsing his welcome toast for the junior varsity athletic banquet. You are breaking his intense focus." My father strolled out of his private study, his reading glasses perched on the bridge of his nose. He cast a brief, indifferent glance at the towering trophy in my hands. "State level? Impressive engineering. Richard Vance's daughter, the quiet little scientist." He spoke with a chilling detachment, as if he were reading a minor headline about a total stranger in the morning newspaper. There was no proud embrace. There was no request to see how the desalinator worked. Suddenly, my older cousin Marcus slipped out from the kitchen, a smirking, venomous presence in our house. Marcus was a smooth-talking opportunist who constantly flattered my father to secure real estate commissions. He stepped up beside me, tapping the metal plate of my trophy with a loud, mocking ping. "Do not strain yourself carrying that heavy metal around, Clara," Marcus whispered, his breath smelling of stale coffee. "You need to learn how to play your part. Just be a nice, quiet shadow for Julian. When he takes over the real estate empire as CEO, I will personally talk to him and make sure you get a nice, stable salary as his administrative assistant." My own father nodded in quiet agreement. Marcus is right. Ambition is fine, Clara, but loyalty to the family structure is paramount. Go put that medal in your closet and wash up for dinner. The massive trophy suddenly felt like a piece of rotting garbage in my hands. I carried it up the back stairs, shoved it deep into the darkest corner of my closet behind my winter coats, and shut the door. I sat on the floor and stared at my raw, burned fingers. Later that night, unable to sleep, I crept back downstairs to get a glass of water. A thin sliver of light leaked from beneath my father's massive office door. I pushed it open slightly. The room was empty, but sitting squarely on his polished leather desk was a thick, legally bound document titled Master Estate Planning and Trust Allocation. My eyes scanned the crisp white pages until I found the distribution breakdown. It was laid out in undeniable legal text. 90% of my father's massive commercial real estate holdings, all liquid capital, and the primary family mansion were allocated directly to Julian Vance upon his 20th birthday. The remaining 10% was locked inside a highly restrictive, non-liquid trust, controlled entirely by Julian, acting as sole trustee to distribute a meager, conditional monthly living allowance to me. They had priced my life. They had legally quantified my exact worth as a human being, reducing my existence to a rounding error in my brother's massive inheritance. I closed the leather cover, stepped out of the study, and walked back up the stairs in absolute silence. I stopped crying forever. I knew that if I stayed inside their real estate empire, I would be suffocated and slowly erased. I packed my single suitcase for college the day after I graduated high school, leaving without a single dollar from a college fund. But I believed that the absolute worst of human betrayal was confined to the blood inside my parents' veins. I was so incredibly wrong. College was not an ivy-covered academic dream for me. It was a brutal, relentless exercise in extreme financial survival. My university academic grants covered exactly 80% of my tuition. Every single remaining expense, textbooks, housing, food, and the basic cost of existing, was a towering mountain I had to scale entirely alone. My parents automatically transferred exactly $100 into my checking account on the first of every month. It was an insulting, token gesture designed entirely to appease their own social consciences so they could tell their wealthy country club friends that they were supporting their daughter's education. To survive, I built a daily schedule that would have crushed a seasoned military recruit. The true center of my existence was not the lecture hall, but the small, sterile guard station of the campus security department. At 10 o'clock every night, while my classmates were heading out to fraternity parties or sleeping in their warm beds, I was pulling on a stiff, scratchy security uniform and lacing up steel-toed boots. My shift ran from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. For 8 hours, I patrolled the dark, silent academic quadrangles, my heavy boots clicking against the concrete, before returning to the small security booth to monitor the grainy security camera feeds. That little booth became my academic sanctuary. Under the harsh, flickering fluorescent lights, smelling of stale floor wax and cheap disinfectant, I propped open my heavy corporate finance textbooks. I drank thin, bitter coffee from an ancient machine that tasted like melted plastic. While I was calculating complex corporate valuation models at 3 in the morning, my phone would buzz with social media notifications. I would stare at my cracked screen, watching Julian post videos from expensive steakhouses or VIP nightclub booths. His captions were always a variation of living the dream. Massive thanks to the best parents in the world. I channeled that burning injustice directly into my academic performance. I became a machine. During my junior year, I was taking an advanced doctoral-level calculus course while working double shifts to cover for a sick security coworker. I had gone 48 hours without closing my eyes, living entirely on cheap vending machine crackers. During the final exam, my brain finally hit a physical wall. I passed out right at my desk, my cheek resting against the cold wood. When I woke up 20 minutes later, the lecture hall was completely empty except for my professor, Dr. Eris, a notoriously strict mathematician. I scrambled to my feet, horrified. "I am so sorry," I stammered, grabbing my pencil. "I work the night shift. I can finish the proofs." Dr. Eris held up my scratch paper. His eyes were wide, staring at the complex equations I had scribbled in the margins before blacking out. "Clara," he said softly, his voice full of genuine awe. "You did not just solve the final exam problems. You corrected a foundational flaw in the textbook's advanced derivative theorem. Who is tutoring you?" "No one," I replied, gripping my heavy backpack. "I cannot afford a tutor. I read the proofs during my security patrols." He looked at my faded uniform and my worn-out boots. "You have a generational analytical mind, Clara. Do not let anyone slow you down." As soon as my morning classes ended, my day was still only half over. I took the city bus directly downtown to my unpaid afternoon internship at Henderson Media, a small, perpetually struggling boutique marketing agency. My official title was corporate intern, but in reality, I was free administrative labor. I made coffee, organized physical storage rooms, and answered endless phone calls. The agency owner, Mr. Henderson, was a deeply stressed man in his late 50s who looked like he had not taken a vacation in 20 years. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, after losing his biggest automotive account to a massive corporate competitor, he walked out of his glass office looking entirely defeated. He dropped a heavy, dust-covered accordion file onto my lumpy metal desk with a loud thud. "Here, Clara," Mr. Henderson mumbled, rubbing his temples. "This is our physical graveyard. It is a collection of dead leads from the last 12 years. Small local businesses we rejected because their marketing budgets were too small to generate a profitable agency commission. Go through it. Build a spreadsheet. Just find something to occupy your time while I figure out how to pay our lease." He intended it as busy work, but when I wiped the thick gray dust from the cardboard cover and opened the first flap, my heart skipped a beat. This was not a graveyard. It was an undiscovered goldmine. The files were stuffed with the raw, desperate stories of Nashville's forgotten working-class entrepreneurs. There was Elena Rossi, an elderly immigrant woman running a traditional bakery called the Rolling Pin that was facing imminent foreclosure. There was Samuel Miller, a third-generation honest auto mechanic whose shop was being systematically choked out by massive corporate repair chains. There were tailors, independent shoemakers, and small neighborhood hardware stores. They were brilliant at their crafts, but completely invisible in the modern digital economy. Massive corporate agencies like Larson Global, run by the ruthless and predatory CEO Brent Larson, wouldn't touch them without a massive upfront retainer. I spent the next 3 weeks working in extreme secrecy. During my night security shifts, between camera patrols, I built comprehensive digital transformation profiles for all 40 businesses in the graveyard. I designed streamlined financial structures, created low-cost digital acquisition models, and drafted custom brand copy. I saw myself clearly in their struggles. I was the discarded, overlooked daughter. They were the discarded, overlooked businesses. We were the underdogs of the city, starved of capital but rich in raw capability. I needed a partner to help me execute the massive volume of creative design work. I turned to Chloe, my university roommate and my absolute closest friend. Chloe was a brilliant graphic designer from a working-class background who constantly complained about her predatory student loans. I trusted her implicitly. She was my only ally in a world that felt entirely hostile. One Friday evening, I locked the door to our small dorm room, pulled out my comprehensive master plan, and spread the financial models across our lumpy carpet. "Chloe, look at this," I whispered, my eyes burning with an intense, intoxicating passion. "This is our ticket out of poverty. We do not need to beg massive corporations for entry-level jobs. We can launch our own independent agency right out of college. We target these discarded local businesses. We work on a strict performance-based revenue model. We automate their digital customer acquisition, and we take a percentage of the gross growth. I call the holding structure Beacon Path." Chloe's eyes widened as she scanned the revenue projections. "Clara, this financial architecture is genius. You have mapped out the entire local market. We build it together," I promised, taking her hands. "You handle the visual branding identities, and I handle the financial engineering and digital infrastructure. We will be completely unstoppable." For 4 days and nights, we worked in extreme lockstep. We drank cheap energy drinks, completely ignoring our regular coursework. We built beautiful master pitch decks, fully functional website prototypes, and comprehensive brand books for the top 10 businesses in the graveyard. It was the first time in my entire life I felt the profound joy of true partnership. I felt safe. On Wednesday morning, I woke up at 6 o'clock, my back aching from sleeping on the floor. I reached for my laptop to review our final master presentation for Elena Rossi's bakery. My computer was completely wiped. The master folders were gone. The physical printed pitch decks were missing from the desk. Panic hit my chest like a physical blow. I spun around. Chloe's bed was neatly made. Her closet door was hanging open, completely stripped of her clothes. Her massive desktop design monitor was missing from her desk. Sitting squarely in the center of her bare wooden desk was a crisp corporate envelope bearing the embossed gold logo of Larson Global. My hands shook violently as I tore open the flap. It was a formal corporate employment contract signed by Brent Larson himself. Chloe had been immediately appointed as the Senior Executive Creative Director of Larson Global's newly launched Local Enterprise Division. Attached to the contract was a copy of a cleared corporate deposit receipt. She had been handed a $10,000 cash signing bonus. Chloe had not just stolen my designs. She had taken my entire master financial architecture, my proprietary local market research, and my complete client target list, and sold them directly to the most predatory corporate giant in the city. She had traded our shared empire for a fancy corporate title and a stack of cash. I did not scream. I did not cry. I stood in the center of that bare dorm room, gripping the embossed corporate paper until my knuckles turned completely white. 10 minutes later, the heavy dorm door clicked open. Chloe stepped inside, wearing a brand new designer trench coat, holding a cup of expensive artisan coffee. She froze when she saw me standing by her bare desk. "Clara," she said, her voice entirely devoid of guilt or warmth. She looked at me with the cold, calculating detachment of a seasoned Wall Street trader. "I see you found the paperwork." I took one slow step forward, my voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly whisper. "You sold our entire future to Brent Larson." Chloe scoffed, taking a slow sip of her coffee. "Grow up, Clara. This is corporate reality. You had a cute financial concept, but you have zero leverage. You do not even have a corporate lawyer, an operating budget, or a guaranteed salary. How are you going to protect those businesses when Larson decided to crush them?" Larson Global offered me an immediate 6-figure salary, a massive creative team, and a real career. I chose the side with the liquid capital. You should have known better than to trust anyone in this business. She did not even apologize. She walked past me, grabbed her remaining bathroom bag, and walked out the door. That betrayal was the final, ultimate forge. It burned away the last lingering ounce of naive softness inside me. I realized that raw intellect and deep passion without a massive financial shield are nothing more than easy prey for the wealthy. I looked at my bank account balance. I had exactly $2,417 saved from 4 years of night security shifts. Every single dollar was covered in my sweat. I packed my single suitcase, walked out of the university gates, and took the city bus to the darkest, most run-down industrial edge of downtown Nashville. The heavy rain was soaking through my coat. I walked down an alleyway behind an abandoned brick warehouse until I found a peeling, water-damaged cardboard sign taped to a basement door. Commercial storage space for lease. No windows. Bare concrete. $300 monthly. Contact J. Sterling. I stood in the freezing rain and dialed the number. A rough, ancient voice answered on the second ring. I want to lease the basement, I said, my voice hard, absolute, and ringing with a terrifying determination. I have the cash right now. I will be down in 5 minutes, the old man grunted. I hung up and looked at the peeling paint of the basement door. I was at the absolute bottom of the world. But as I stood there, the foundation of my true empire began to set into solid rock. The basement room under the warehouse on 5th Avenue was 10 by 12 feet of raw, uninsulated concrete. It smelled intensely of damp earth, old motor oil, and profound neglect. A single bare light bulb hung from a frayed black cord in the center of the ceiling, casting long, harsh shadows across the floor. There was no cellular reception and zero natural light. It cost $300 a month. It was the absolute perfect corporate headquarters for Beacon Path. I spent $200 at a local pawn shop to buy a thick, heavy, 3-year-old laptop with a scratch screen. I hauled a discarded metal folding table and a lumpy, mismatched office chair out of a nearby commercial dumpster. I sat down under that glowing bare bulb, uncapped my pen, and began to build my holding structure. I could not compete with Larson Global's massive advertising budgets or Chloe's stolen visual presentations. I had to bypass the traditional marketing industry entirely. I had to win on absolute, undeniable financial performance. My very first target was Elena Rossi's bakery, the Rolling Pin. I walked into her small, flour-dusted storefront on a dreary Tuesday morning. The display cases were filled with incredible, perfectly baked traditional Italian pastries, but the shop was entirely empty. Elena was sitting behind the old mechanical cash register, looking exhausted and deeply defeated. I did not offer her a glossy marketing brochure. I placed a clean, legally binding one-page contract onto her glass counter. "Mrs. Rossi," I said, my voice polished, authoritative, and radiating absolute competence. "My name is Clara Vance. I run Beacon Path. Larson Global rejected your business because you cannot pay their $10,000 retainer. I do not want a retainer. I want to fully automate your digital customer acquisition for 30 days. I will build your digital infrastructure entirely at my own expense. If your gross revenue does not increase by a minimum of 300% by the end of the month, you owe me nothing, and I will personally pay your next month's commercial lease. If we hit the target, Beacon Path retains 25% of the gross growth." Elena looked at the contract, then looked into my eyes. She saw the intense, burning hunger of a fellow survivor. She reached across the counter, took my cold hands, and squeezed them. "You have a deal, Clara," she whispered. For 30 days, I practically lived inside her bakery. I did not waste time on expensive graphic design. I took pure, unedited, high-resolution videos of Elena pulling steaming, golden croissants out of her ancient stone ovens at 4 in the morning. I captured the incredible sound of the flaky crust tearing open. I built a hyper-targeted, highly localized digital distribution funnel that pushed those raw videos directly to the mobile phones of every corporate worker within a 3-mile radius right at 7 in the morning, right when they were commuting to work hungry. The payoff was immediate and staggering. By the second Saturday, a line of 80 people wrapped entirely around the brick corner of the block in the pouring rain. Customers were holding up their phones, demanding the exact warm pastries they had seen on their screens. At the end of the month, Elena's gross revenue had quadrupled. She walked down the concrete steps into my damp basement office, crying massive, genuine tears of joy. She bypassed my lumpy folding table, wrapped her arms entirely around my neck, and pulled me into a deep, no-ngam embrace. It was the first genuine, loving hug I had ever experienced in my life. She placed a cleared corporate check onto my desk for $12,000. "You saved my family's life, Clara," she sobbed. That check was my absolute proof of concept. Beacon Path was not just a survival mechanism, it was a lethal financial weapon. Elena became my most aggressive vocal evangelist inside the Nashville working-class community. She told Samuel Miller at the auto repair shop. Sam signed my performance contract, and within 2 months, his repair bays were completely booked with corporate fleet contracts I had secured through targeted digital outreach. Sam told the local custom shoemaker, who told the independent commercial tailor. My client portfolio exploded organically, built entirely on working-class solidarity and undeniable financial return. I was working 18 hours a day. I was the chief executive officer, the master financial engineer, the digital infrastructure architect, and the nighttime janitor. At midnight, I swept the raw concrete floor of my basement room with a broken broom. My physical body was exhausted, but my mind was completely untouchable. Within 14 months, Beacon Path had generated over $800,000 in liquid reserves. The damp basement could no longer contain my operational scale. I signed a massive commercial lease for an entire sun-drenched, top-floor glass penthouse office in the Gulch, the absolute most expensive commercial real estate district in Nashville. With liquid capital, I built my internal army. I did not hire polished corporate executives from elite agencies. I systematically recruited the discarded, brilliant underdogs of the city. My absolute first hire was Maya, a brilliant 26-year-old visual designer on the autism spectrum who had been cruelly fired by Brent Larson because she struggled with corporate social presentations. I gave Maya a private, quiet corner office with customized lighting and doubled her previous salary. Next came Toby, a deeply experienced 52-year-old financial copywriter who had been discarded by Henderson Media because of his age. We became a towering fortress of working-class excellence. We were completely loyal to one another, fueled by massive pots of strong coffee and a shared, burning mission to dismantle the corporate monopolies that had discarded us. Our absolute defining market triumph arrived when a small, brilliant local technology startup approached us. They had engineered a revolutionary logistics software platform, but they had been arrogantly rejected by Larson Global because their young founders wore faded hoodies and lacked elite social connections. I reviewed their software code and realized they were sitting on a multi-million-dollar disruptive technology. I bypassed our standard fee structure entirely. I offered to fully fund and execute their national launch in exchange for a 20% equity stake in their holding corporation. We unleashed a brilliant, hyper-targeted digital blitz that completely bypassed standard advertising networks. The software platform skyrocketed to the top of the national enterprise charts. 6 months later, a massive Silicon Valley conglomerate acquired the startup in a monumental $40 million cash buyout. Overnight, Beacon Path received an $8 million liquid cash injection. I was 27 years old. I was featured on the cover of the regional Forbes magazine under the bold headline, "The Underdog Champion, How Clara Vance Disrupted the Monopolies." Brent Larson panicked. Seeing Beacon Path systematically capturing his local market share, Larson attempted to use his massive corporate cash reserves to illegally choke out our print distribution partners. He threatened massive commercial lawsuits against any commercial printer in Tennessee that accepted our purchase orders. I was sitting in my glass boardroom, preparing our legal counteroffensive, when the heavy glass doors swung open. It was Jonathan Sterling, the ancient, gruff landlord who had leased me the concrete basement room. He was wearing his usual faded flannel shirt and muddy boots. He bypassed my executive assistant, walked directly to the head of my polished conference table, and dropped a heavy, solid gold corporate card onto the glass. The card bore the master crest of Sterling Horizon, the multi-billion-dollar global media conglomerate. Jonathan Sterling was not a struggling working-class landlord. He was Jonathan Sterling Sr., The legendary, ruthless billionaire founder of the conglomerate who had quietly retired to industrial Nashville to escape corporate society. He looked at me with a fierce, terrifying grin. "I watched you build this machine from the raw concrete up, Clara. You have the heart of a pure corporate killer. Let us see if that pathetic little parasite Brent Larson dares to issue a lawsuit against my national distribution network. You have my full corporate authorization to utilize Sterling Horizon's master legal department. Crush him." With the multi-billion-dollar shield of Sterling Horizon at my back, Larson Global completely collapsed. Chloe was summarily fired without severance. I was a multimillionaire, but I did not buy luxury items. I did not buy an expensive sports car or designer clothes. I channeled every single dollar of my personal wealth into a secret, highly complex financial maneuver designed to capture my ultimate target. I established a confidential alliance with Liam, my father's long-suffering corporate chief accountant. Liam was an honest, deeply exhausted man who had spent 20 years watching Richard Vance systematically abuse working-class contractors and manipulate corporate tax structures. Liam despised my father. Meeting in the dead of night inside my secure penthouse, Liam handed me the internal debt ledgers for Vance Commercial Real Estate. My father's entire empire was a massive, fragile house of cards. To fund Julian's massive gambling debts and lavish lifestyle, my father had massively over-leveraged his commercial properties. His primary commercial loans were held by a private commercial lending institution called Crestview Trust. The massive notes were reaching their absolute maturity dates, and my father lacked the liquid capital to cover the balloon payments. Utilizing my massive liquid cash reserves from the tech buyout and operating entirely through anonymous shell corporations managed by Sterling Horizon's elite corporate attorneys, I quietly and aggressively initiated a hostile takeover of Crestview Trust. It took 3 months of intense financial warfare. On a Friday afternoon, the master legal transfer cleared. I personally owned 51% of the voting shares of Crestview Trust. I was the absolute primary debt holder for Richard Vance. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when my secure phone lit up with a direct text message from Liam. "Your father just pledged his personal Belmead mansion, his liquid corporate reserves, and his Rolls-Royce Cullinan as collateral to secure a final, desperate 6-month extension on his commercial loans. The master legal assignment contracts are sitting squarely on your glass desk." I walked into my dark corner office, looking out over the glowing Nashville skyline. The heavy legal document was resting on my polished desk. I ran my fingertips over my father's bold, arrogant signature on the bottom line. I had total legal custody of his entire existence. I owned the roof over his head. I owned the ground beneath his feet. I thought the worst was over. I was so incredibly wrong. But I did not call him. I did not issue a public threat. I simply sat down in my leather chair and waited in absolute silence. Because I knew with terrifying mathematical certainty that his massive, unchecked arrogance would soon drive him right to my door. 2 weeks after the multi-million-dollar technology acquisition finalized and my face was plastered across the cover of Forbes, I decided it was finally time to upgrade my personal transportation. I did not walk into an exotic European dealership to purchase a fragile, low-slung Ferrari or a flashy Porsche Taycan like the one my brother worshipped. I drove down to a specialized restoration facility in industrial East Nashville and laid $85,000 in crisp, verified cashier's checks onto the counter to purchase a fully customized, matte bronze 1974 Ford Bronco. It was an absolute commercial tank of a vehicle. It had heavy-duty suspension, rugged all-terrain tires, and a restored vintage black leather interior that smelled of raw oil and old-school American grit. It was unpretentious, highly capable, and structurally bulletproof. It felt exactly like the holding corporation I had built from the raw concrete up. I climbed into the high driver's seat, turned the heavy mechanical key, and felt the deep, guttural rumble of the V8 engine vibrate through my chest. As I paired my secure smartphone to the upgraded digital dashboard console, the high-definition screen instantly illuminated with an incoming cellular call. The caller ID displayed a single word that I had not seen on a screen in 5 long, silent years. I sat in the idling Bronco, the heavy commercial air conditioning blowing against my face, and watched the digital call timer tick past 4 seconds. My heart did not race. My palms did not sweat. The profound, suffocating panic that used to seize my chest whenever my mother contacted me had been entirely completely paved over by 5 years of brutal, unyielding corporate warfare. I tapped the glass screen to accept the connection. "Executive Office, Clara Vance speaking," I answered, keeping my vocal tone entirely flat, objective, and devoid of any familial warmth. "Oh, Clara. Oh, thank the good Lord in heaven, it is truly you," my mother's voice erupted over the Bronco's surround sound speakers. It was the exact same melodic, overly manicured southern drawl I remembered, dripping with high society Chanel perfume and intense, manufactured emotion. "Sweetheart, your father and I are just sitting here at the Belmead breakfast table bursting with pure, unadulterated pride. Richard was walking through the local Barnes and Noble yesterday afternoon and saw your beautiful face right on the Master National Edition of Forbes magazine. He bought 20 copies on the spot. We read the entire master breakdown about your incredible $40 million tech buyout. I just sat here over my morning tea and wept massive, happy tears. To think of our quiet little girl running a massive corporate penthouse, our brilliant little CEO." The historical revisionism was so blatant, so aggressively completely fabricated, that it was genuinely breathtaking. I was never their little girl. I was their domestic administrative labor. I was the sensible utility property they discarded at a rainy public bus stop so they could sign title transfer documents for a teenage boy's luxury toy. I let a heavy, suffocating, 5-second corporate silence hang over the cellular connection. I wanted her to feel the sub-zero temperature of my reality. But Eleanor Vance was a seasoned country club socialite, an absolute master at completely ignoring uncomfortable conversational boundaries. "Anyway, darling," she barreled on, her cheerful vocal cadence completely unwavering. "Richard and I were just talking, and we realized that 5 years of miscommunication is simply far too long for a prominent Nashville family. Legacy is everything, Clara. We want to drive down to the Gulch this coming Wednesday afternoon to take a comprehensive private tour of your new penthouse agency suites. We want to take you out to a lavish celebratory dinner at the Palm, exactly like old times. We are just dying to hear all the behind-the-scenes financial details about how you structured such a towering operation." The sheer, unmitigated audacity of the request was almost magnificent. For 5 years, they had not issued a single text message, a routine holiday card, or a basic inquiry into whether I was alive or dead while I was scrubbing concrete basement floors and eating vending machine crackers. Now that my holding corporation had achieved massive, undeniable institutional liquidity, they wanted to waltz into my executive lobby and bask in the warm, golden reflection of my liquid capital. They were not seeking a family reconciliation. They were commercial real estate investors scouting a newly appreciated prime asset. A cold, hyper-calculating analytical program executed inside my brain. The internal ledgers provided by Liam, my father's exhausted chief accountant, were sitting in my master office safe. I knew exactly how desperate Richard Vance's cash flow situation was. I wanted to look them dead in the eyes and watch them execute their final, parasitic commercial pitch. "My operational calendar this week is heavily compacted," I replied, my voice cutting through her southern charm like a sharpened titanium blade. "I can allocate a strict 45-minute consultation window next Wednesday afternoon at precisely 2 o'clock. Standard corporate security protocols require all external visitors to present government-issued identification at the master ground floor lobby desk." "Oh, well, 2 o'clock Wednesday it is, darling." "That sounds absolutely wonderful," she chirped, completely unfazed by being processed like a standard commercial vendor. "We are just so incredibly excited to finally have a proper family reunion, Clara. We will see you then." She terminated the connection. I put the heavy Ford Bronco into gear and drove out into the blazing Nashville sunlight. Every single mile I covered on the asphalt was a documented operational victory. The subsequent week inside Beacon Path was an exercise in extreme, controlled corporate staging. I paced the polished concrete floors of our creative suites, instructing my working-class executive staff to operate with absolute, standard professional detachment. I specifically ordered Liam to keep the master Crestview Trust debt assignment folders securely locked inside my personal executive wall safe until my physical authorization was granted. On Wednesday afternoon, at precisely 1:55 p.m., I stood behind the floor-to-ceiling double-paned glass of my corner penthouse office, looking 300 feet down onto the sun-drenched concrete of the Gulch commercial parking plaza. A massive, pristine black Rolls-Royce Cullinan pulled past the master security gates, its heavy chrome grille catching the harsh glare of the afternoon sun. Trailing squarely behind it, looking like a loyal, custom-painted blue puppy, was Julian's Porsche Taycan. It was the exact same luxury vehicle they had chosen over my university graduation, preserved in pristine, climate-controlled perfection. I watched my father step out of the Rolls-Royce. He was wearing a brand-new, bespoke charcoal suit, adjusting his heavy gold Audemars Piguet watch while his eyes immediately began scanning the towering glass exterior of my commercial building, executing a rapid mental calculation of the astronomical price per square foot in this zip code. My mother emerged behind him, clutching a $5,000 pristine white Hermes Birkin bag, her manicured hand shielding her eyes. Julian stepped out of the Porsche last. He was 23 years old now, wearing imported Gucci loafers without socks, a tailored linen shirt unbuttoned to his mid-chest, and My mother rushed across the polished slate floor, her arms wide, completely enveloping me in an aggressive, suffocating cloud of Chanel No. 5. It was an elite socialite air hug, zero actual physical torso contact. "Oh, Clara. Just look at this breathtaking physical architecture," my mother gasped, her eyes darting greedily across our open-plan creative suites, taking in the Herman Miller ergonomic furniture, the towering digital server stacks, and the sheer volume of working-class personnel operating advanced design rigs. "This penthouse lease must be simply astronomical, sweetheart. You have built an absolute commercial palace." My father stepped up, offering a firm, stiff, highly transactional corporate handshake. His cold eyes locked onto mine, completely devoid of paternal affection. "You have executed a very aggressive market capture here, Clara," Richard Vance announced, nodding approvingly. "I reviewed your published digital acquisition metrics. You built a highly efficient cash flow engine. It is a solid corporate tax shelter for Vance." Julian did not even remove his designer sunglasses. He offered a listless, limp wave of his manicured hand, complaining immediately about the commercial construction traffic on Interstate 40. "Your ground floor parking validation machine is slow, Clara. Tell your building manager to upgrade the barcode scanners." I did not offer them artisan refreshments. I did not engage in small talk about the Belmead Country Club renovations. I executed the master agency tour with ruthless, polished efficiency. I escorted them past Maya's customized, autism-friendly visual design suite, demonstrating how our automated digital distribution funnels were generating six-figure monthly gross revenues for independent auto repair shops and working-class bakeries. My parents smiled and offered polite country club nods, but I could see the complete blankness behind their eyes. They looked at my elite operational infrastructure and saw only liquid revenue. They had zero fundamental comprehension of the relentless, bone-crushing night security shifts, the bitter plastic-tasting coffee, and the extreme personal sacrifice that formed the unbreakable bedrock beneath our slate floors. We concluded the institutional tour inside my private executive corner suite. My mother immediately gravitated toward the panoramic glass windows, cooing over the sprawling view of the state capitol. My father walked directly to my polished walnut executive desk, running his palm across the heavy wood, inspecting the physical build quality. Julian dropped himself listlessly onto my imported Italian leather guest sofa, instantly resting his Gucci loafers directly onto the edge of my polished glass credenza. My mother turned from the glass, flashing a brilliant, highly predatory socialite smile. She locked her eyes onto mine, executing the precise conversational transition I had spent half a decade waiting for. You know, Clara, seeing this towering operational infrastructure, it is simply profoundly inspiring, Eleanor purred, stepping closer to my desk. And your brother Julian, he has such an elite analytical mind, exactly like yours, darling. He has spent the last 14 months developing a brilliant, highly exclusive corporate concept to launch a massive online luxury fashion syndicate. He has sourced elite textile manufacturers in Milan and curated a breathtaking master brand identity. She paused, placing her manicured hand over her diamond-encrusted collarbone. We were looking at your massive operational machine, Clara, and we realized that with your elite digital infrastructure and liquid capital reserves, you could help your biological brother get his corporate holding entity off the ground. There it was. The absolute, unvarnished truth behind the 5-year phone call, the sudden Barnes and Noble magazine purchases, and the manufactured breakfast table tears. It was not a family reunion. It was an aggressive corporate equity pitch. I was still classified as an internal administrative resource to be harvested, a low-maintenance utility structure designed entirely to provide a financial safety net for the golden child's expensive failures. The silence inside my corner office became thick, heavy, and intensely compacted, charged with 28 years of unexpressed historical injustice. I remained standing rigid beside my walnut desk, my facial expression entirely completely blank. I let them sit in the freezing void. Julian pulled out his smartphone, tapping the screen impatiently. Yeah, Clara, I need your back-end development team to build the master digital distribution funnels by the 1st of the month. I have a massive commercial textile mixer in Portugal I need to fly out for, so I need the liquid acquisition accounts fully automated before I leave. Richard Vance cleared his throat, stepping forward to assume his natural, highly comfortable position as the master commercial dealmaker. He unbuttoned his bespoke charcoal jacket, resting his knuckles firmly onto the surface of my desk. Let us be entirely practical about this operational merger, Clara, my father stated, adopting a tone that was simultaneously paternal and deeply patronizing. Julian has elite market vision, but what his holding entity lacks is liquid seed capital and national digital marketing savvy. You have built an incredible customer acquisition machine here. It would be a routine operational transfer for Beacon Path to allocate a minor slice of your liquid reserves to your own bloodline. My father reached inside his tailored jacket, pulling out a thick, glossy, professionally bound corporate prospectus and dropping it squarely onto the center of my walnut desk with a heavy thud. He requires $2 million in liquid capital allocation, Richard Vance announced, tapping the glossy cover. We are structuring this as a master family syndicate. You transfer the liquid capital and execute the national digital launch, and your mother, and I will consider it your way of finally returning the favor for the 18 years of elite housing, medical care, and financial support we invested in raising you inside Belmead. That single phrase, returning the favor, hung in the pristine, air-conditioned oxygen of my executive suite like a massive, toxic monument to his spectacular institutional blindness. What historical favor? The favor of locking my state championship science trophy in a dark closet so I wouldn't disturb Julian's athletic speech rehearsal? The favor of handing me a dry technical dictionary and Walmart multivitamins on Christmas morning? The favor of leaving me stranded at a muddy public bus stop on the most important academic morning of my life so he could polish the chrome handles of that exact luxury sports car parked 300 feet below us? A deep, absolute, sub-zero internal calm completely immobilized my nervous system. The historical resentment that had fueled my engine for a decade did not explode into messy, emotional screaming. It completely froze into a solid, razor-sharp point of absolute operational clarity. I knew with terrifying mathematical certainty exactly what execution protocol I had to initiate. This was no longer about personal revenge. This was an aggressive commercial foreclosure. I turned slowly from the panoramic glass, walking deliberately toward my polished walnut executive desk. I did not look at my mother's eager, predatory smile. I did not look at Julian's Gucci loafers resting on my credenza. I locked my eyes directly onto Richard Vance. "Take your imported shoes off my glass furniture immediately, Julian," I commanded, my vocal tone dropping to a terrifying, sub-zero frequency that completely froze the oxygen in the room. "Before I instruct my building security personnel to physically throw you into the commercial dumpsters on 11th Avenue. Julian blinked behind his designer sunglasses, his mouth dropping open in genuine shock. He slowly hauled his legs off the credenza, planting his feet onto the slate floor. I sat down in my high-backed executive leather chair. It did not creak, it supported my posture like an absolute institutional throne. I reached across the walnut wood and completely bypassed the glossy luxury fashion prospectus my father had dropped onto my desk, pushing it to the far edge as if it were a contaminated biological hazard. I opened the master top drawer of my desk. I did not extract Beacon Path's corporate operating ledgers. I pulled out my private, personal checking account book, the exact same individual financial identity I had maintained since I was scrubbing security booths at 3 in the morning. I uncapped a heavy Montblanc Master fountain pen, the solid gold nib gleaming under the recessed LED ceiling lights. "You explicitly mentioned returning a historical favor, Richard," I stated, completely intentionally omitting the word dad. My voice was quiet, highly compacted, and carrying an unnatural, crushing institutional weight. In advanced corporate accounting, to properly close out a historical family ledger, the primary debt holder must establish the exact baseline financial valuation of the original principal investment. So I need you to answer a very simple mathematical question for me before I execute a capital transfer. My father's confident deal-maker expression instantly completely dissolved into a massive, blotchy mask of pure institutional confusion. He knitted his brow, glancing down at the rejected fashion prospectus. "What in God's name are you talking about, Clara? Look at the 5-year gross revenue projections in the Master Index. How much was a standard adult fare for the Nashville MTA public transportation system, specifically Route 12 operating on Belmead Boulevard, on the morning of May 18, 2019? The question landed on the polished walnut desk like an unpinned commercial hand grenade. My mother let out a sharp, suffocating little gasp, clutching her Hermes Birkin bag against her diamond collarbone. Julian lowered his sunglasses, staring across the desk as if I had begun speaking in ancient, deceased language. My father's facial skin rapidly cycled from a pale, pasty white to a dark, furious, highly congested crimson. "What the hell does a public transit bus fare have to do with a $2 million corporate equity syndicate?" Richard Vance sputtered, slamming his palm onto the wood. "Everything," I replied, my voice remaining entirely conversational, completely devoid of emotional variance. I looked up and locked my cold eyes onto his. "Because on that specific morning, while you were standing in your heated garage stroking the custom paint of a Porsche Taycan, you explicitly ordered me to take the city bus to my university graduation. You quantified my total financial and personal valuation to the Vance family holding structure. I kept the master physical receipt." I reached inside my blazer, extracted my personal wallet, and pulled out the crumpled, faded $1.75 transit ticket from behind the clear plastic window. I smoothed down the worn corners with my Montblanc pen and placed it squarely onto the exact center of Julian's luxury fashion prospectus. With a physical hand that was completely, terrifyingly steady, I filled out the master dateline on my personal checkbook. I made the financial draft payable directly to Richard and Eleanor Vance. In the master numerical valuation box, I wrote, in crisp, sharp architectural ink, $2. In the master legal memo line, I wrote 7 definitive words, "Master bus fare settlement, adjusted for inflation." I gripped the edge of the certified slip and executed a neat, razor-sharp, profoundly satisfying tear from the binding. I leaned across the polished walnut wood and held the $2 draft directly out to my father. Richard Vance stared at my hand, then stared down at the $2 draft, his eyes bulging as if the certified paper were coated in lethal radioactive isotopes. "Take it," I commanded, my voice hardening into an absolute, unshakable institutional concrete. This master draft completely settles our historical family ledgers. This is the exhaustive, total, and final financial reimbursement for every single microcent of housing, food, and emotional support you ever allocated to my personal existence inside Belmead. You are fully paid in principle. We are now commercially and biologically even. My father finally snatched the insulting draft from my fingertips, his entire physical frame trembling with an uncontrollable, violent rage. He crumpled the $2 slip in his fist, his vocal cords choking with pure institutional indignation. You arrogant, ungrateful, psychotic little bitch. Richard Vance Gamlen, stepping back from the desk, his bespoke suit jacket flailing open. After everything I did to protect your legal standing inside this city, you think you can insult my intelligence with public transit garbage? I will personally contact the senior litigation partners at the Vance corporate holding firm right now. I will hit Beacon Path with an aggressive, multi-million-dollar commercial lawsuit for tortious market interference. I will bury your holding structure in emergency injunctions and asset freezes until you are physically forced to liquidate these entire penthouse suites just to pay your legal retainers. You are finished in commercial real estate, Clara. Finished. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover the story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. As my father's empty, desperate legal threats bounced off my double-paned glass windows, I reached under the lip of my walnut desk and pressed the silent, physical underdesk security release. The heavy frosted glass sliding doors of my private internal executive suite instantly parted. Stepping out onto the polished slate floor was Victoria Sterling, the legendary, profoundly feared chief executive officer of Sterling Horizon's master venture holding arm. She was wearing a tailored, sub-zero white Tom Ford power suit, accompanied by 2 elite, highly intimidating senior commercial litigation attorneys from Wall Street holding heavy leather briefcases. Victoria Sterling walked past my guest sofa, completely ignoring my mother's horrified gasp, and locked her sub-zero, predatory gray eyes directly onto Richard Vance. You are not going to issue a commercial lawsuit against anyone inside this zip code, Richard, Victoria Sterling announced, her voice executing an absolute, sub-zero corporate execution. Put your cellular device away immediately. Richard Vance completely froze. His entire physical frame locked up as if he had been struck by a high-voltage electrical line. His lower jaw dropped open. Being a career commercial real estate developer, he recognized Victoria Sterling instantly. Her institutional holding firm controlled the primary commercial credit taps for the entire eastern seaboard. Miss Sterling. My father stammered, his confident dealmaker voice rapidly evaporating into a thin, pasty wheeze. What are you doing operating inside an independent digital marketing agency? Victoria Sterling stepped directly up to my polished walnut desk, resting her manicured hand firmly onto the shoulder of my blazer. She looked down at my father with absolute, monumental institutional disdain. I am operating here acting as the primary legal and structural advisor for the absolute majority voting shareholder of Crestview Commercial Trust, Victoria Sterling stated rapidly, her words landing like heavy iron beams. You see, Richard, my analytical risk management department has been tracking the internal debt ledgers of Vance Commercial Real Estate for 36 operational months. To cover your son's massive private jet charters, his string of completely failed business entities, and his aggressive, 6-figure gambling markers in Las Vegas, you took out massive, highly toxic mezzanine commercial loans from Crestview Trust. Victoria Sterling reached across my desk and dropped a certified, legally embossed master deed assignment copy squarely onto the crumpled $2 check. Those commercial notes reached their absolute, hard institutional maturity dates at midnight last night, Victoria Sterling explained Dan Thep. You completely defaulted on the principal balloon payments. You pledged your Belmead mansion, your corporate operational accounts, and the physical vehicle title to that Rolls-Royce Cullinan sitting in our ground floor plaza as secured collateral to secure the debt. Victoria Sterling leaned forward, resting her knuckles onto the walnut wood next to mine. And precisely 3 weeks ago, Clara Vance utilized her private liquid reserves to completely acquire 51% of the voting shares of Crestview Trust. She does not work as an internal asset for my conglomerate, Richard. I work as a fiduciary advisor for her. She is your sole, absolute, and exclusive commercial debt holder. If you raise your vocal frequency inside her executive boardroom again, she will authorize the master foreclosure warrants before your express elevator reaches the ground floor. The resulting physical and psychological reaction inside the corner suite was an absolute masterclass in catastrophic systemic collapse. I watched my father physically deflate. The towering commercial developer who had spent his entire adult life evaluating human beings by their square footage realized in a fraction of a second that he legally owned 0 inches of the earth beneath his custom Italian shoes. His knees visibly buckled, forcing him to grip the back of the guest sofa to maintain his balance. My mother's manufactured Chanel smile completely shattered into an open-mouthed, violently trembling mask of absolute institutional horror. Her manicured fingers went limp. The pristine white Hermes Birkin bag slipped from her lap, plummeting onto the polished slate floor with a loud, hollow, deeply sickening thud. Julian hauled himself upright on the leather cushions, his designer sunglasses sliding completely off his face and crashing onto the slate. He stared across the walnut desk at me, his eyes wide, his mouth working silently as if he were staring at a mythological titan that had just emerged from the raw earth to swallow his golden universe. The Master Family Syndicate was permanently dissolved. The operational ledgers were fully balanced. I stood up slowly from my executive leather chair, adjusting the button of my tailored blazer. My internal emotional baseline was completely, beautifully flat. I looked down at the 3 biological entities standing on my slate floor. The historical invoice has been verified and settled in full, I announced, my vocal cadence echoing with pure administrative finality. The corporate consultation window is permanently closed. You have precisely 30 calendar days to vacate the residential premises on Belmead Boulevard before the Davidson County Sheriff's Department executes the physical seizure and lockout warrants. Get out of my building immediately. Richard Vance attempted to formulate a vocal response, but his throat only produced a dry, pathetic, high-pitched clicking sound. He looked down at the certified foreclosure deeds, looked at Victoria Sterling's sub-zero litigation attorneys, and realized he possessed 0 operational leverage. He completely abandoned his glossy fashion prospectus on my walnut desk, spun on his bespoke heel, and stumbled blindly toward the master glass sliding doors. My mother let out a loud, ragged, deeply pathetic sob, scurrying rapidly behind him like a frightened country club mouse, while hauling a completely mute, deeply stunned Julian by his linen sleeve. I did not follow them to the elevators. I walked calmly to my panoramic glass window, resting my palms against the cool pane, and watched their physical departure execute 300 feet below inside the commercial parking plaza. It was a brilliant, highly satisfying visual demonstration of show, don't tell. I watched my father reach the automated ground floor parking turnstiles. He rapidly inserted his paper parking validation ticket into the master scanner. The digital screen flashed a bright red institutional rejection. Richard Vance frantically extracted his corporate American Express Platinum card to settle the routine $20 exit fee. He swiped the magnetic strip. The digital display immediately illuminated with clear, bold text, "Transaction declined. Master account frozen." He rapidly extracted his personal Elite Visa card. He swiped it violently. Declined. Down in the concrete plaza, the wealthy commercial developer was completely trapped by a wooden parking gate. I watched Julian frantically dig through the pockets of his imported Gucci trousers, extracting crumpled $5 bills and loose quarters he had left over from a country club vending machine, rapidly feeding the physical currency into the automated toll slot just to get the heavy black Rolls-Royce Cullinan out onto the public asphalt. Precisely 10 minutes later, as the black Rolls-Royce merged into the heavy interstate traffic, my secure penthouse communications rig illuminated with an incoming cellular connection from an unlisted local number. I tapped the speakerphone toggle. It was my smirking, opportunist cousin Marcus. His historical vocal confidence was completely gone. He was hyperventilating, his words tumbling out in a frantic, deeply terrified panic. "Clara." "Oh, thank Almighty God you answered your direct line." Marcus shrieked over the digital speakers, the loud, chaotic sound of shredding paper and slamming file drawers echoing visibly in his background. "Listen to me, Clara. Everything has completely collapsed. Julian forged your father's master corporate signature on an aggressive, highly leveraged commercial debt guarantee for a massive multifamily real estate development syndicate in Las Vegas. It turned out to be a certified, deeply criminal Ponzi scheme. The federal financial banking regulators from the SEC just physically breached the ground floor glass doors of the Vance corporate holding offices. They're seizing the master escrow ledgers. My commercial real estate broker's license is getting permanently revoked because my physical signature is attached to the subsidiary holding accounts. You have massive liquid capital reserves from the tech buyout, Clara. You have to wire $2 million in clean liquid currency to my criminal defense attorney's master trust ledger right now. I am your bloodline, Clara. I am your family." I stood by the panoramic glass, looking out at the sprawling, beautiful green canopy of the Nashville hills beneath the clear afternoon sky. I smoothed my hand down the lapel of my blazer. "You explicitly instructed me to be a nice, quiet shadow for Julian, Marcus," I replied, my voice completely smooth, objective, and carrying absolute zero emotional sympathy. "You explicitly promised that if I stayed in my closet, you would personally secure me a stable salary as his administrative assistant. Well, please consider this cellular communication my formal, permanent resignation from the Vance holding structure. Enjoy the dark." I completely severed the connection and instructed my digital infrastructure to permanently blacklist his cellular identity. That evening, I did not retreat to my penthouse residential apartment to sit in the dark and process familial grief. I fully leased out the exclusive, sprawling open-air rooftop dining terrace of the Bourbon Steakhouse downtown, overlooking the glowing neon arteries of Broadway. I invited the entire working-class staff of Beacon Path, Maya, Sarah, Toby, and our internal development engineers, alongside the foundational clients who had handed me my absolute first commercial liquid currency, Elena Rossi and Samuel Miller. The atmosphere on the rooftop was an absolute, intoxicating explosion of working-class triumph. There were no stiff, transactional country club handshakes. Massive tomahawk ribeye steaks and expensive bottles of imported Italian red wine covered the long wooden tables. Maya was openly laughing, completely free of corporate social anxiety, detailing her new automated visual rendering rigs. Toby stood at the head of the long table, raising his crystal glass to deliver a brilliant, highly emotional, profoundly funny corporate toast celebrating the permanent destruction of Larson Global. Elena Rossi sat directly to my right. She was wearing her absolute best traditional black Sunday dress. She completely bypassed her fine crystal wine glass, reached across the white linen tablecloth, and wrapped both of her warm, weathered, flower-scarred hands entirely around my right palm. "My beautiful grandmother in heaven is looking down at this long table tonight, Clara," Elena whispered, her elderly eyes shining with deep, genuine maternal devotion. "She says you have the exact, unbreakable internal soul of a master traditional baker. You took raw, bitter, discarded working-class flour, and you put it into an extreme furnace, and you turned it into warm, nourishing bread for the entire city. For the absolute first time in 28 biological years, sitting under the glowing Nashville stars surrounded by my verified internal personnel, I felt a single, completely hot, profoundly genuine teardrop escape my left eye and roll slowly down my cheek. I did not survive my university career in spite of biological family. I achieved absolute institutional liquidity because I systematically went out into the concrete graveyard and built my own authentic family. Later that night, at precisely 2 a.m., I stood completely alone on the private stone balcony of my residential penthouse suites, looking out over the silent, sleeping commercial real estate districts of the city. Resting on the glass patio table beside me was the legally executed master title transfer deed for the Belmead mansion. As I looked down at the physical paperwork, the intense, roaring internal furnace of historical resentment that had continuously powered my operational engine for over a decade suddenly, completely extinguished. The psychological fire went out. But it did not leave behind a hollow, aching, deeply agonizing void. It left behind a vast, profoundly serene, beautifully cleared architectural space. I looked at the Belmead deed and realized a foundational truth about human narrative development. Systematically executing a commercial liquidation against Richard Vance did not physically travel back in time to comfort the 12-year-old girl who sat sobbing on her closet floor with burned fingertips. Simply completely crushing your historical abusers is an act of pure operational demolition. It leaves behind only a flat plain of cold ash. True, absolute, permanent institutional victory requires advanced civil engineering. You have to clear away the toxic debris and pour a towering concrete shelter for the external working-class personnel who are currently standing at the exact same rainy bus stops you survived. I opened my secure laptop under the moonlight. I opened a completely blank, highly pristine master digital planning document. I did not type out agency gross revenue projections. I typed out a master holding title, the Beacon Forward Master Comprehensive Scholarship and Mentorship Trust. Executing a structural jump forward in linear time, the subsequent 24 operational months completely transformed Beacon Path from a localized Nashville holding agency into a towering, nationally recognized institutional digital infrastructure syndicate. We successfully launched regional corporate suites in Austin, Denver, and Seattle. My daily existence became a rapid, highly accelerated operational matrix of national client acquisition briefs, international corporate venture negotiations, and multi-million-dollar institutional asset management. But my absolute, true internal heartbeat, the exclusive operational center of my personal universe, was the Beacon Forward Foundation. I personally capitalized the foundation's master endowment accounts with an aggressive, liquid $15 million cash allocation derived entirely from my retained corporate equity holdings. I explicitly instructed our internal legal architecture to design the master trust allocations to completely bypass standard, deeply flawed academic scholarship models. Simply handing a struggling working-class university student a routine check for tuition is grossly insufficient. It does not solve the profound, systemic operational deficits of extreme social isolation, food insecurity, and a complete lack of elite corporate guidance. The Beacon Forward Scholarship was engineered to be absolute and comprehensive. It fully covered all university tuition, institutional fees, and expensive engineering textbooks, but it simultaneously allocated substantial monthly liquid living stipends, secured safe off-campus residential housing, and established an internal emergency medical ledger so a verified student would never be commercially forced to abandon their academic trajectory due to a vehicle mechanical failure or an unannounced corporate dental bill. The most vital operational component for me was the mandatory 1-to-1 executive mentorship program. Every single verified scholarship recipient, officially classified within our network as a Beacon Scholar, was directly paired with a senior, highly successful corporate executive operating within their specific academic discipline. They received the precise institutional backing, the professional networking armor, and the absolute, unshakable emotional validation that I had spent 2 decades performing for inside Belmead. During our inaugural national application cycle, our internal processing rigs were completely inundated with thousands of raw, deeply profoundly agonizing personal narrative essays from across the American landscape. I established a strict operational rule. I sat as the primary voting chair of the Executive Selection Committee, and I personally read every single verified submission. I read about a brilliant 20-year-old former foster care youth in Ohio who was working double night shifts at a commercial laundry facility while attempting to maintain a top ranking in pre-medical biology. I read about a young working-class man in rural Pennsylvania whose biological parents physically destroyed his computer rigs because they viewed his desire for higher education as an arrogant betrayal of his regional manual labor roots. And then my eyes locked onto the verified master submission file of Grace Jenkins. Grace Jenkins was an 18-year-old female high school senior residing inside a deeply remote, heavily economically depressed rural pocket of the Appalachian Mountains in eastern Tennessee. Her personal narrative essay was a haunting, absolute biological echo of my own internal soul. She was graduating at the absolute top of her regional high school class, possessing an elite analytical mind and a profound, burning passion for constitutional civil rights law. In her master submission text, Grace documented her biological familial reality with crushing, analytical clarity. My biological father explicitly informed me that if I accept my institutional admission grants to the state university instead of remaining inside our residential home to execute domestic labor and work shifts at the local commercial diner, to assist in paying off my older brother's heavy automotive truck loan, I am completely deceased to this family holding structure. They explicitly stated they will not attend my graduation commencement. They told me I am entirely on my own. It was the exact, unvarnished master operating code of my childhood, preserved in raw, heartbreaking Appalachian text. I did not route Grace Jenkins a glossy corporate acceptance email via my administrative staff. I did not issue a routine telephone call. The following Saturday morning, I climbed into my rugged, custom matte bronze Ford Bronco. I drove 5 hours east across the state of Tennessee, ascending steep, winding, deeply rutted gravel mountain logging roads until I physically parked the massive Ford Beast squarely in front of the peeling, unpainted timber porch of Grace Jenkins' rural family residence. I bypassed the barking yard dogs, walked directly up the wooden steps, and completely ignored Grace's scowling, deeply hostile biological parents standing in the screen doorway. I extracted the certified, legally embossed Beacon Forward Master Full Ride Charter from my leather portfolio and handed it directly into Grace's raw, trembling hands. "Grace," I announced, my voice carrying absolute, towering institutional backing. "My name is Clara Vance. I sit as the Chief Executive Officer of Beacon Path. Your historical familial debt ledgers are permanently zeroed out. You have been awarded our Master Full Ride institutional backing. I am your verified legal sponsor. Nobody inside this timber structure possesses the operational leverage to hold your life back ever again." Grace Jenkins looked at the embossed gold holding crest, looked up into my eyes, and completely collapsed against my tailored blazer, weeping massive, heavy, profoundly deeply agonizing tears of pure, absolute operational relief. I wrapped my arms firmly around her shoulders, holding her against my chest. "We completely believe in your analytical capability, Grace," I whispered into her hair, speaking the exact institutional text I had spent my entire youth desperate to hear. "You are more than successful enough." Executing a final structural transition forward, exactly 12 operational months later, we hosted our master inaugural Beacon Forward Foundation National Symphony Gala inside the sprawling, crystal chandeliered grand ballroom of the Schermerhorn Symphony Center downtown. Every single one of our verified foundational Beacon scholars was commercially flown into Nashville and accommodated inside luxury hotel suites. Physically interacting with them inside the ballroom was an absolute, profoundly sacred spiritual evolution. They were living, breathing institutional monuments to the supreme, unconquerable power of human capability when provided with clean liquid capital. During the master evening presentation, Grace Jenkins, having just concluded her freshman operational year at the State University with an absolute, verified 4.0 GPA inside pre-law, stepped up to the master polished walnut podium. She was wearing a breathtaking, simple white silk evening gown, her physical posture completely rigid, her eyes radiating absolute institutional confidence. The Beacon Forward Foundation did not just pay my university tuition notes, Grace Jenkins announced to the silent, weeping ballroom, her vocal frequency ringing with absolute sub-zero power. It allocated me an unshakable corporate community. It assigned me an elite litigation mentor. But most importantly, it provided me with the undeniable, documented physical proof that my personal existence is not an internal familial debt that I have to work off to appease the people who biologically birthed me. I sat in the absolute front row, flanked squarely between Victoria Sterling and Elena Rossi. As I looked up at this brilliant, towering young woman operating on her authentic stage, the historical internal void inside my chest was completely, permanently sealed. At precisely midnight after the gala concluded, I was sitting inside the quiet, luxurious leather interior of my idling Ford Bronco when my secure smartphone console illuminated with an incoming SMS text message from an unlisted, prepaid cellular identity. I tapped the screen. It was a slightly blurry, low-resolution digital photograph taken at dusk. The image displayed one of our foundation's massive, towering commercial highway billboards situated on Interstate 40 right at the primary western entry sector into Nashville. The illuminated billboard featured a brilliant, high-definition portrait of Grace Jenkins alongside bold, clean white architectural text. Your true legacy is the infrastructure you build, not the property you inherit. Beacon Forward Foundation. Standing squarely on the loose gravel highway shoulder directly beneath the towering steel support pillars of the billboard, completely co-aro inside a cheap, heavily faded, discounted Walmart winter rain jacket, was my biological mother, Eleanor Vance. A subsidiary SMS text message rapidly populated onto the console screen beneath the photograph. Clara, it is Julian. I am physically standing inside the covered public MTA bus stop directly across the concrete highway median watching Mom. Our biological father completely abandoned the holding structure and relocated out of state after the commercial bankruptcy finalized and the Belmead residential property was officially auctioned off by the county holding banks. My personal Porsche Taycan was summarily repossessed by commercial asset recovery teams. We currently reside inside a deeply rundown 2-bedroom rental apartment in West Nashville. Mom physically walks 3 miles down the rough gravel interstate shoulder to this billboard installation every single evening just to stand under your holding crest. She is completely humiliated and deeply, deeply ashamed to telephone your executive suites. We possess zero liquid capital reserves. I am currently working manual shifts at a local auto parts retail counter. Please, Clara. We are deeply, deeply sorry. I sat in the quiet cab of the Ford Bronco, the warm engine humming beneath my boots, and stared down at the digital display. I looked at the physical representation of my mother standing co-aro in the highway dirt beneath the towering, multi-million-dollar institutional legacy I had engineered entirely from the bitter scraps she had discarded. I monitored my internal psychological baseline. I felt absolute zero historical anger. I felt absolute zero vindictive, gloating triumph. I felt zero desire to route back an aggressive, multi-paragraph index detailing her historical failures. The intense, agonizing, 20-year biological addiction to securing her maternal approval had been permanently purged from my operating code. I had fully verified my institutional valuation to the commercial markets, but infinitely more importantly, I had fully verified it to my own soul. I tapped the digital keyboard interface and routed back a completely objective, non-transactional, 6-word administrative instruction: take care of Mom. Buy your own bus ticket. I did not append a familial sign-off. I completely bypassed the conversational interface, accessed the master operating system controls, and tapped the bright red institutional prompt: permanently block and blacklist cellular contact. The screen instantly cleared into absolute, pristine blackness. Executing our final visual transition, imagine me sitting squarely onto the warm, heavy matte bronze steel hood of my Ford Bronco. I am physically parked on the absolute highest scenic stone ridge of the Natchez Trace Parkway, looking out across the sprawling, majestic, rolling green timber canopies of the Tennessee Thung Lung. The setting American sun is painting the massive cloud formations into breathtaking, vibrant streaks of deep violet, rich magenta, and pure, burning liquid gold. I look directly into the camera lens, speaking in a steady, profound, deeply experienced narrative cadence. When people aggressively strip away your physical transportation and command you to walk into the heavy rain, they genuinely believe they are permanently condemning you to the dirt. They do not possess the advanced structural vision to understand that when an individual is commercially forced to navigate the sharp rocks entirely alone without an internal safety net, their human feet naturally develop the calluses and structural density required to completely shatter the concrete beneath them. Your biological familial bloodline is simply the physical holding entity that issued your initial biological entry code. It does not possess the legal or moral authority to dictate your ultimate market valuation. The absolute supreme, ultimate revenge against historical manipulation is not aggressively proving your abusers commercially wrong. True, permanent institutional victory is executing such a towering personal internal evolution that their external socialite opinions, their delayed country club apologies, and their desperate, pathetic financial regrets no longer possess the operational leverage to move the needle of your internal peace by a single micromillimeter. If you are sitting before this digital screen right now and you have spent your entire adult existence operating as the silent, uncompensated, discarded utility structure in the cold shadow of someone else's golden pedestal, I want you to understand that your historical silence was never institutional weakness. It was a verified, heavily protected strategic incubation. I want you to access the operational interface below this video right now and explicitly comment the absolute master keyword free. By executing that physical action, you are issuing formal public notice to the digital algorithms and to yourself that you have officially terminated your internal administrative servitude, exited the physical graveyard, and initiated the master construction protocols for your own authentic holding entity. My name is Clara Vance, and our true journey forward has officially, permanently begun.